So I'm not sure if that was like a solution or not. It sounded like a you had me going for a second there, and then ran out of gas or something. So we're going to start with this one right here. This was played by two very strong players. And white just made the last move, which is why in this current position, black's queen is hanging. So white just played the move bishop from d4 to e5, hitting the queen. And naturally expected some reply with the queen, and then I think he was going to deal with the fact that his rook on e8 was hanging, or is hanging, and basically he would have a position with two bishops, but otherwise completely equal. But bishop e5 unleashed the possibility for black to strike back tactically in this game. So looking at this position here, after move bishop e5, it's black to move, and I think some problems, some tactics, you look at and it says, you know, white to play or white to move in, and win in 3, or win material, or checkmate in 2. And I never liked those because it seems like when you're in an actual game, you don't ever get that benefit. No one says, okay, well, stop what you're doing and, you know, you can win in 2 moves. Because then I think I would never miss a tactic ever. That would be nice. But I like to have tactics that are just, well, black to play and win. Because that leaves it more open-ended. And if you say black to move and checkmate, you kind of know you're looking for a mate. Win material, you know you're looking for that. So I prefer just black to play and win. And that's what this problem is right here. Yeah. So even if you don't have the answer, your wrong answer may very well help some of the other members of the audience find the correct solution. So we're just working on the thinking process. What we play is black here, and white might work. Front row.
Black can play rook takes e8, bishop takes c7, rook takes e1, getting 2 rooks for a queen.
Right, so black can play rook takes rook here. Our queen is hanging. So bishop takes queen, and you'll play rook takes rook. And in that position, if I play king f2, are you going to move your rook somewhere? Because you're right, you're getting 2 rooks for the queen. And most of the time, 2 rooks for the queen, we say in chess, is a little bit better for the rooks. Sometimes the queen is better, sometimes the rooks are better. You play what? Rook f1. And then if I took your rook on f1? And if I didn't take your rook on f1, and I played king g3? Two rooks and a bishop. That's a little different than 2 rooks. Because 2 rooks, I would argue, is around even. Let's say it's slightly better maybe for black, but you could do a bit better. Now rook f1, I'm sorry? Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a detail. Rook takes e8 was suggested. Rook takes e1. Now this is already 2 rooks for the piece. So okay, we could move our rook back, but you know that's not really the end of the tactic. That's not overly impressive. But rook f1 was the footer of the email from the front row here. And if king takes, well, knight e3 check, and takes here, and if we take back, we've also got this. So we're up a full rook there. So that's definitely good. If white doesn't take that rook, because he sees this fork coming in with knight e3, king g3, well, we can take this bishop on c7. Now we don't just have 2 rooks, but we have 2 rooks. We also have a knight. So if we were going to have a debate about whether 2 rooks or the queen would be better, well, now you just won the debate because you also have a knight. So that's too much. I can't argue against that. So that's the solution. Not just rook e1 and being satisfied with 2 rooks, but also important throwing in rook f1. We have the knight fork coming on e3 next, and rook f1 also is a nice sort of desperado move, where you make your rook's under attack, but you put it on a square where it can't be taken. And so king g3, knight c7, and then you have this position, which would be winning. So yes, very good. That's correct.
What do you do if king e2?
King e2. Now I'm probably looking to give a check. And again, if king takes rook, we would probably have knight e3. And if the king went somewhere that wasn't attacking my rook, probably the same principles would apply that applied last time when the king was on g3. So anywhere that's not attacking that rook, all of a sudden I have this knight c7 move coming in. So let's say king d2, d3. Well, d2 makes it a little easy, rook f2. So let's say here. Now, while there might be moves like rook e3 or other moves, let's just say the simplest is to say knight takes c7, and we have the same thing where we've got 2 rooks and a knight. So it seems like white's kind of in trouble no matter what. But yes, if white plays king e2, we would have to be a little bit cautious not to take on c7, let's say with the knight or the rook, because right now, like this, you have this, and if you take with the knight, you don't have knight e3 anymore. So now I could take your rook. So a few details, let's say, in every line that actually matter for the solution, but the bottom line is you take those 2 rooks, and then we've got this nice check, rook f1. So bishop e5 was actually just a blunder in this position. Black played rook e8 and went on to win the game. All right, let's move on. This is a position from another game. And the first question is, does anyone know what the game is? I'd be impressed. Sometimes tactics from games are so famous that you see the tactic position and you already know the game. And if that's the case, I need to know now so I never pick you for the answer. All right, so we have some liars in the room. That's good. All right, it's black to play. It's black to play, and what I like to do as well, you know, instead of black to move and mate, black to move. The other thing I like to say is that in this position, it's first of all black to play and win, but I like to have the whole line. So if you can do your best to calculate in your head, then when you present an answer, you're not just saying one move, and then I say another, and then you come up with one move. So if you can calculate the whole thing, it'll be a lot better for improving, practicing tactics. I think that's always the way you should do it, because when you're playing a chess game, you don't get to play one move and then they play a move, and you get to take back and try again. So you got to be sure of your answer the same way you might be sure if you're playing a chess game and you had this position. So black to play. There's a few ideas floating around in this position. But one thing, of course, we have to note is that black is, in fact, down 1 full rook. And it's sitting there on b1 for white. So you can be sure that in this position, you probably need to go for something quite forcing. Otherwise, if we trade down to an endgame, I've got that extra rook. So how do we bail ourselves out here with tactics as black? And again, the full variation would be nice, but see if you can calculate as far as you can in your heads, and then suggest an answer once you've got a variation put together. I think that's a good way to approach. And as I said, anything that you say, whether it's right or wrong, is probably going to help your comrades arrive at the answer as well. So it can be a team effort. Is that a pump fake?
Yeah, well, it is kind of a fake because I only have one. I'm sure there are a bunch of branches, but like I'll start with E, F, G, EF, or EF, rook B2, FG check, F takes G2 check, rook takes G2, Queen F1 check,
Mate.
wins, right?
Yep, checkmate.
Win. Check.
So if black's pawn ends up on G2, no matter what I recapture on G2 with, let's not forget I've got that bishop up in the corner on A8 that's going to be pinning it, so I'll always have queen down to F1 mate. So that's a variation that does mate me, which probably means that, let's say, if you're calculating in your head this variation, E takes F3, we would probably not play rook takes B2. So white would need another move because rook B2 does get mated by force after pawn takes on G2. Yeah.
So EF, GF.
Well, EF, GF, right, there's a few things. First of all, EF, GF, not only can I play queen takes G4, full queen, bishop takes F3, almost full queen, queen takes B1, full rook. So black has 3 good options, spoiled for choice. So after E takes F3, sometimes the hardest part of tactics is actually finding out what you're supposed to play for your poor opponent. But so far, we've only recommended losing variations. So how about a better move for white if we're going to calculate this E takes F3 line? Uh-huh.
So after E takes F3, Queen takes F5, F takes G2, King G1, Bishop D4, Queen F2, and then I stop there.
You what?
I stop there after Bishop D4. Because
Well, why did you stop there?
Queen F2,
Uh-huh.
and then Bishop takes F2, King takes F2, and then you're still down.
Right. So I'm not sure if that was like a solution or not. It sounded like it's you had me going for a second there, and then ran out of gas or something. But maybe you can have someone pick you up on the road and you know, pick up where you left off. Did you guys listen to that
I think we
variation?
Line can get improved in some way. Yeah, I looked at like things that resembled this, right? EF, Queen F5.
So the first thing is that queen F5 is maybe a much better move for white. Somehow we finally arrived at maybe a decent move for white,
No, relax.
which is if pawn takes F3, queen takes F5, and it would take on G2, so that was the line, and then white's got only one move, so king to G1. And then bishop D4, and then queen back to F2. And that's where our friend ran out of gas. This doesn't necessarily mean that the line is right, but that's the position that he arrived in. If there's anything there for black, that might be helpful. Otherwise, we might need a new variation. But if you can visualize that position, it was bishop D4 and then queen back to F2 for white. Because if you're not going to take my queen, well, I'm going to use it to block that checkmate idea. So E takes F3, queen takes F5. Maybe there are other moves, but the line was pawn takes G2, king G1. We all liked bishop D4, saving the black bishop on B2 and maybe using it for the attack. But after queen F2, we're rather stumped because, well, yeah, if you take my queen on F2, king takes F2, let's remember in the starting position, I have a full extra rook. So you'd have to win some substantial material in order to be able to just play an endgame. So if bishop takes F2, king takes F2 there, you only have a bishop and a knight left, and I still have 3 pieces and a rook. So you have to be careful not to just, I mean, can't just trade a bunch of pieces because we don't have that many to start with. Are there any other ideas? Because we either feel like we're on the right track and we must be missing something in this variation, or we could just be on the wrong track and it's the wrong variation. The back? Okay. Queen takes F5. King G1. You could do E takes F, so that's one line that we didn't say so far. But what I was saying is, remember at the start, you're already down 1 rook. So if you just take my queen back, problem is I'll go take your bishop, rook takes B2. Now I'm up a rook, I'm up a bishop, temporarily, but that's enough material. So you got to make sure you have a follow-up to that at least. I feel like you might not be surprised if I said you were close. In the back again?
You take f3, and then queen f5, f takes g2, king g1, bishop d4, queen f2, bishop takes f2, king takes f2, knight f4.
Okay. And you want to play next move what?
Knight h3.
Uh-huh. And then when you queen your pawn, I'm going to have to take it, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to take me back. And I know it's a lot of work, but if you visualize that position, let's say that I move my bishop from f8. Let's say I save it after knight f4. Let's say bishop d6. Then when you go and queen your pawn, I give up my rook. I'm going to have bishop b3, knight a2, and my bishop down here. You're only going to have two pieces, your knight and your bishop. So even after all that hard work, remember, I'm still up a piece there, so that would still be losing for you.
So in the variation after bishop d4, queen f2,
Yeah.
just play knight f4.
Knight f4,
The direct knight h3.
queen, and if queen takes d4,
Then just knight h3.
then knight h3 is checkmate. So we had this position for a while, but it can be hard to visualize all the squares that are available or unavailable. But knight f4 here threatens knight going to h3, checkmate. So if we play queen takes d4, we get mated, surprisingly only with, a pawn, a knight, and a bishop. But knight h3 is so powerful here, it just has to be stopped. So white doesn't have an option. He doesn't have a choice to play like queen takes d4. You can't get rid of the g-pawn either because you're pinned. So white's only real move here, honestly, is like something like h4. So how would we finish off this?
Knight h3 check.
Knight h3, king h2. The reason we're still playing, remember, is I do have that extra rook, so.
Well, I'm taking on f2 in my mind, but I haven't. Yeah,
So taking on f2 would be actually pretty much the line that was suggested in the back. So bishop f2, king takes, knight h3, and somehow I would end up a piece there, miraculously. So it looks like I'm drawing dead here, but I've got an extra rook, so I think we still need to be a bit precise here. How do we finish it off? Knight f4 was the pretty move. Now this is the boring stuff, but still have to finish off here. Knight e2, king h2, bishop e5, king h3. Well, now you're not attacking my queen, so I might just get away there. In front,
Bishop takes f2, king takes f2, knight h3, and then you
king g3,
g1 queen,
take it,
and then
and then I save my bishop from f8. And remember, you got to count those pieces. I'm going to have 3 of them, right? My bishop from f8 I'm saving, plus the other 2, and you've only got 2 left. We're so close. As a unit, we are so close.
So back to the knight e2 check.
Okay, king h2, yeah,
Bishop takes queen.
right?
And I'm threatening the queen, so you're going to have to give the rook back.
And you don't lose a minor piece
Yeah.
in that variation. So not knight h3, which we're so infatuated with. That was the whole point of knight f4, but it did its job with h4. Now knight e2, and just takes. And now when we queen, we're going to get the rook, but we're also going to keep all 3 of our pieces. And finally, that's a winning endgame. Finally. So every step of the way, I think most people here seem to know the themes, but you have to put them together, why they're very literally called puzzles, in the right order. Because they're not going to work necessarily in every order, but you know which moves are correct. But finally here, knight e2 is the move that kind of slips under the radar because we're so focused on knight h3. That was the point of knight f4 in this position. But I think maybe the hardest move is remembering that knight f4 is possible and that we can actually hang our bishop in the middle of the board because of this very strange knight h3 checkmate. So because of that, black's actually winning after knight f4, and the line that we just showed is the end of it. And yeah, all of this happened in a game, and it ended exactly the way we just looked at. Knight e2, king h2, bishop takes, and of course played on. It's not like just resigned there, but black's going to be up in that position, 2 pawns in an endgame. Plus, none of white's pieces are really placed that well, and to be honest, white's king is still in trouble. So, yeah, that's that one. It's e takes f3, and then there's a few key moves, but knight f4 and knight e2 at the very end. We have this position now, and it already looks much less complicated than the last one, thank goodness. But it's white to play and win. Very simple. White to play and win, not as complicated. We can relax a little bit, but I think it's tricky nonetheless. We have some ideas here based on the position, but again, do your best to try to think of a variation where you might give a move for white and a response for black and hopefully reach an answer that way. So try to have the calculation all in your head rather than one move at a time, because like I said, that's how it works when you're playing over the board too. So it's good practice. I think last example was probably the best example of how everybody contributing a little something, eventually we got to the answer. No one was able to just get the whole thing start to finish, so that's why even if you're not sure, raising your hand and trying out would definitely help.
Something like it.
Speaking out of turn, it's just I saw a hand back there from a young mature boy. Yeah? It doesn't work? Okay, well your hand was up, so that was better. Hey, you!
Okay, rook e2,
Uh-huh.
queen e2, rook a8 check,
Mm-hmm.
bishop a8, queen b8 check.
Let me hear that full variation.
Okay, it's coming. I just want to make sure I don't say anything like super dumb. All right, queen b8 check. Then I get 2 heavies to block an
Yeah.
order on the d or e. So rook d8, queen d8,
Sure.
queen e8, queen e8.
So,
When you go with
right.
Okay, or bishops. Okay.
So,
okay.
So rook e2, first of all, just so everyone knows, because it might be helpful for your own calculations, rook e2 was the move suggested, and then queen takes e2, so trying to deflect that queen down the board, and then rook a8 into the corner, and then if bishop takes a8, well, it's nice, we get to bring our queen down to b8, and even though I have like 19 points that I can throw in front of that queen, it's not enough to stop it, and that will be a back rank mate. The problem is after rook a8, that black has 2 pieces on the c8 square, so I can pick one of them, put it in front, let's say the bishop, probably the better one, and unfortunately that position, well, we either need another move for white or it doesn't look like we're crashing through. But that was the suggestion. It doesn't quite work. All right, how about you?
so you play rook e2, queen takes e2, and then rook takes b7.
Okay, so using his idea, rook e2, queen takes e2, and you said
Rook takes b7.
rook takes b7.
And if rook takes b7, then queen d8 is
Mm-hmm.
and
So you're right if rook takes b7 in that line, if you guys can visualize it. Rook takes b7. Instead of taking back, I'm going to go queen d8. Once again, do a back rank mate. Did you have another move for black instead of rook takes rook?
yeah, well, you're also sending rook b8 right now,
Mm-hmm.
and you're also sending rook takes d7.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to protect both.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking
How about queen e8?
rook to b8.
Rook to c8? Shucks. But again, the variation suggested was also rook e2. Again, with some sort of deflection idea, but this time wanted to play rook takes b7. But the reason that the back rank mate plus the rook can be defended at the same time is I have this move queen back to e8, and then if rook b8, rook back to c8. So unfortunately, that one doesn't work. But again, it feels like we're very close. Mm-hmm.
So straight away, just take the bishop on b7.
Okay, so rook takes b7, rook takes b7. Now rook e2. And if rook takes your queen on b6,
Then I take the queen.
right? And then now it's my turn with nothing threatened. So I'll play a move like h6, for example. And there's no, if my pieces were hanging, then there might be a double attack, but you've actually sacked a rook to get there. So yeah, then in the final position, I would just be up material. So even flipping the moves doesn't work. Sometimes it does. I was just talking about how you got to put the puzzle in the right order. So that's a pretty logical guess. Here, in the front.
How about rook e2, queen takes e2, and queen takes b7?
Queen takes b7. So same thing. Rook e2, queen takes e2, queen takes b7. First of all, rook takes your queen.
Rook a2.
Right, and then no matter what I throw in front of you, you're just like the Kool-Aid man. You're just breaking through every wall. All right, so I don't take your queen. Now I don't have, let's say, queen e8 because I've actually got a whole rook hanging on d7 by both of your pieces. So what about rook d8 from d7? Queen takes f7 is hanging there. So by playing queen takes b7, we're not only threatening the rook, not only threatening the back rank, but that wasn't enough in your last guess, right? Because I had queen e8. But we've added a third thing we're threatening here, which is the 7th rank. Queen takes b7. Suddenly we're threatening queen takes f7, queen g7 mate. So that would be what we need. Queen takes b7. And again, this move was saving us last time, but it doesn't anymore. That's a free rook. We're going to be up a knight and, okay, up a knight and a pawn. By the way, this knight is kind of a hero as well because it's been covering this checking square in every single line here. And if black could have ever checked, it would be very bad. I mean, there'd be hanging stuff everywhere. So that knight is kind of a hero, and queen b7 is a very nice move at the end. Sort of, I felt like everyone's answers was sort of how my brain would work if I was calculating it. My first guess would be like, okay, why don't I sack the rook and play rook a8 and try to mate? Okay, that doesn't work. Why don't I try to do this and take the bishop with the rook? That doesn't work. And then maybe eventually you realize you need one more threat, which is on the 7th rank. Sometimes it's possible to defend 2 things at once, but it's often very difficult to defend 3 things at once. So queen takes b7 was that extra idea we needed to solve this one. So yeah, it's just simply rook e2, queen takes, and queen takes b7. All right, now this one is also from a game. In fact, an aside about problems is that I always like to do problems that are generally from games because I think they're very realistic. Obviously, they're from games. But it's nice to do puzzles or problems that existed or happened in a real game because, first of all, it means you got there by legal moves. A lot of problems, you just put the pieces on the board. But maybe that will never ever happen in a game. And so you're basically just practicing a pattern. When you do problems that are from games, not only are you practicing a pattern, but you're getting used to something that you may actually see again, a position similar to that. And right here we have a position where it's white to move, so white to play and win. And it looks like a position that's I mean, very easy to believe came from a real game. Black obviously has a bit of an exposed king, but so does white. So things have gotten a little crazy in this one. And black obviously just played the move queen to f6, blocking a check from d4. And white to move has to deal with the fact that next move, we have moves like f2 check coming. And I think at the moment we can even say that black is up a pawn. So it's white to play and win. We've got to take our time here. This could be an actual, this could happen to you in your games. What would you play as white? What are some ideas that are floating around in the room?
It's just an idea, it's not mine.
Right. Well,
Rook 1, E.
right? Because one of the most glaring things about the position is that the queen is hanging on d4. So whatever we do, we're required to deal with that either by some sort of forcing move where we're hoping to make queen takes d4 a bad move, so maybe let it happen, but it's a bad move, or don't let it happen, and then you either have to block the queens, Exchanging the queens, we can already say probably doesn't look like the solution because there's no follow-up. And rook 1 to e5 was the idea here. So bringing this rook from e1 here, yeah, up to e5, threatening, rook takes g5. One of the bonuses of that move is it sort of deals with f2 check for black, because then we could just step out of the way like king g2. Whereas if we made another move, maybe f2, even if white could take it, well, if we trade the queens off, we could probably say that's not the answer to the tactic because we just wouldn't have any firepower left. So rook 1 to e5, maybe something to consider. Not really a follow-up to it, but it does threaten rook g5. Probably after rook e5 moves to consider would be, maybe black moving his king somewhere, like potentially king f8 or king, yeah, maybe king f8. I think king f8 is probably what I might suggest against that. Yeah. So did you say queen f6 was the first one?
Yeah.
So white playing queen f6?
Yeah.
Okay, so trading the queens? And black takes it back?
Yeah.
And do you know what you want to do after that? That's fine. You don't have to. That's why it's good to say it out loud. Because if you play queen takes queen, what I was thinking is that after I play king takes queen, the reason why it might be tough to find a move is, well, you don't have your queen on the board anymore. And a queen is such a powerful piece that you might need it to deliver either a checkmate or for any of the tactics that you want to work. So you always got to be careful when you're doing puzzles if you ever play a move that just trades your queen off. Not that it's always wrong, but that if you trade your queen off, you better have a lot of other pieces that you can attack with. So one of the things is if you play queen takes queen, king takes queen, the king's on a dark square. You have a light squared bishop here, so you know that that bishop can't check the king. And the only square that the rooks can check from would be e6. And you're going to lose more material, bishop takes rook, if you check there. So because of that, I would say probably you want to look for moves that keep your queen on the board, and you might need her to deliver some kind of checkmate or tactic. But yeah, be careful about trading off the queens. In the back?
Rook takes f7.
Okay, well, you left me without a choice. So if you play rook f7, I've got to play king takes.
And then queen f7.
And then after queen a7, first of all, what about king to g6?
Rook e6.
Rook e6 is going to win my queen. So queen a7, king g6, rook e6. So what about king f8 instead of king g6?
Rook e6.
Rook e6 still, not winning my queen this time. But let's say rook e6. I've got to move my queen. Thankfully for white, with the queen down there on a7, you notice that the diagonal to my king is actually covered. So that's very important, actually, that I don't have like a queen d4 check in any line. So after rook e6 hitting my queen, let's say queen, first of all, queen f4. Well, you have better.
Oh,
Queen e7 would be mate there. And so queen f7 to stop your checkmate.
then
Queen c5, and then the square that I would love to move my king to, maybe f7 is taken. What about king g7?
queen g5.
Well, you've got a pawn on d5, don't forget. Sometimes the most annoying pieces are your own. Like, hey, why are you there? Didn't need you. So that pawn on d5 means there's no queen going across the board on the 5th rank. Sorry?
Rook e7 in that position.
Are you in the same position?
No, like in that position.
So after queen c5,
Yeah.
king g7.
Then rook e7.
Rook e7 is going to be skewering my queen on f7 to my king on g7. That's correct, yep. So rook f7 is the move that I think when you approach this problem, you should be calculating first. The reason is because not only is it a check, but it sort of brings the king out into the open where the rest of our pieces could try to attack it. So rook takes f7, queen's pinned, and it's also checked, so there's no queen d4. This move is forced. Queen a7, because we really don't have any other checks. Black, unfortunately for him, can't play rook d7 or queen e7, nothing to block it. And the king only has 2 squares to go. So it's actually not the longest calculation that we've had to do. King g6 is nice because just rook e6, the easy skewer there. And king f8 is probably the more difficult one because there's not a forced sequence here. Like after rook e6, black has options where to move his queen. So we don't get that feeling that it's very forced. Maybe that's why rook e6 is probably the trickier move to find in this tactic. Rook e6, and we've got a checkmate in 1 on e7, so black just has to play queen f7 or queen g7, and simply no matter which one he chooses, there's going to be something wrong with it. Queen g7, queen c5, queen e7, that's a mate. And queen f7, as we recently discovered after queen c5, king g7, not queen g5, but rook e7 is actually the same idea that we've been using in most of these lines, which is that the rook eventually will find a way to skewer the king or the queen to the king. So rook e7, and black is just down a bishop, basically, because we had a problem actually earlier where we were evaluating 2 rooks for a queen. And that's reasonable. That's fine. I wouldn't say that you're ever going to win a tactic puzzle by doing that. But when you add an extra piece in, then it's too much. So rook in a piece, 2 rooks in a piece, or queen in a piece are going to be better than their counterparts. So yeah, rook e7, and then the queen's just skewered, and that's that. So this one, this is, I'm not sure actually if I could tell you if this is from a game or not. But I can say that it's equally as valuable because it certainly looks like it could be. So it's not some sort of random position with, like 2 bishops on the same color or something absurd. You could get this in a real game. And we've got even material here. One thing we could say about black's position is it appears as though he might be better just because he's got the 2 bishops, but he's actually faced with a bit of an issue here, is that his queen's attacked on c6, and although it might not look nice for white here with all those weaknesses, if black moves his queen somewhere safe, white's going to take the knight on e4 and just be up a piece. So maybe white has sort of committed all these ghastly weaknesses around his king because he thought he was winning a piece here. Knight e5 was the last move, attacking the black queen, and the black queen seemingly doesn't have any squares available to keep defending the knight on e4. So that's the basis of the tactic. It's black to play, and, well, not just lose and let that happen. In the back? That was quick.
Knight g5.
Okay.
So,
Now, what's your idea with knight g5?
well, if there any queen g2 mate,
Okay, so simply knight g5, bishop takes g5, queen g2 mate is the simple one. Obviously, everyone, myself, what happens? I think this just like fell off. What happens when I take your queen?
then you play knight f3.
Okay.
King h1 is the only legal move. And then you play bishop g2, king takes g2, knight takes e1, and you're forcing rook e4.
That's cute. What about if I was not so cooperative? Because I like your calculation. That was really quick, really good. But knight g5, what if I was maybe just as good as you in calculating, and I saw all that, and I said, I don't want this kid to embarrass me, so I played f4 after knight g5. Knight takes f3. Queen f2. I mean, hey, I might like your position, but are you winning? Remember, at the end of the day there, we do have equal material. So I like your position. It looks like a good position for black, but you're actually not even up one pawn. You're not even up one single pawn. And I can tell you that unless you've got me in a beautiful zugzwang or something, that you probably, in the final position, need to be up some sort of material. And again, for those that were wondering about his calculation, it should be pointed out that what he said after knight g5, if I didn't play f4, which is why I said it was good, well calculated, is knight g5, if knight takes queen, black wants to play knight from g5 to f3 check, forcing us to play king h1, and then black playing bishop to g2 check, forcing king takes g2, and then we play knight takes e1 check, king moves, knight takes c2, and proposing that that line is winning. So that was the reason why knight g5 was played there. But yeah, knight g5, I think what I'll do is I'll play f4. And although knight f3 looks like a nice position for you, I don't think I could say that it's just winning. How about in the front?
Knight d2.
So same thing, like same calculation, different square?
Yeah.
What do you think of knight d2 in the back? Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay, yeah, I saw your hand up as well. Because knight d2, whether you're the guy who suggested that variation or you just listened to it, you can see that most of his calculation looked pretty good. That whole line looked good, but then I'm able to just play its f4 move, and suddenly I don't suffer from any of that. So knight g5, f4, we can deal with that maybe by playing knight d2. So we're still threatening queen g2 mate, which means that no matter what, white is going to have to take our queen, but we also don't allow an f4 move, because the knight d2, if white plays f4, then there's no covering queen g2 mate, because that's exactly why the knight will sit on d2 and block the queen on c2 from covering it. So now, if we actually look at that calculation, I think it's more forced. Knight d2, I have to take the queen, knight f3 check, king h1, bishop g2, king takes g2, knight takes e1, king f1, let's say, knight takes c2, but I don't think the calculation's over. I'm going to play knight takes e7 check, right? Because my knight was sitting on c6 there, let's not forget. King f8, bishop takes c5. One thing about tactics when you're playing them in your actual games is after the tactic, your opponent never resigns. When you're doing tactics, it'll say, you know, win material in 4 moves. So you'll play 4 moves, you'll win material, and then you'll stop calculating. But in a game, no matter if your opponent is up or down material, unless it's a lot, they're probably going to keep playing, which is why when you calculate over the board, you have to be a little more careful than to just imagine you're doing a tactic. You have to calculate usually further. You have to make sure that the final position, when you're done calculating, is very clear. Maybe you're ahead material, maybe there's no more threats. But leaving a white knight on c6 in this position and saying that's the end of your calculation is a bit dangerous, because you've got a rook hanging there, you've got a bishop hanging. You know, we gave up some material to have all these beautiful calculation. So you also got to make sure you're counting in your head. Make sure you're not down material. I mean, who knows? So you got to finish the line. So my knight's on c6, and we're going to try to do this in our head. It's good practice. And I'm playing knight takes e7 check at the end of this variation. King f8, and now I'm saying I'll play the move bishop captures your pawn on c5, defending my knight, maybe setting up some discovered check. And we just have to finish the calculation here. So what do we do after that? Also, does anyone know what the material is in that position? Because that's a good place to start. It's hard to really calculate the best moves if you don't even know who's ahead in material. Yeah, in the front here. Black takes the rook on a1. Let's say before you take the rook on a1, do you know what the material is? Are you ahead as black, or what's going on there? Right. So there's a knight on e7, knight on b1, bishop on c5, rook on a1 for white. Got the two rooks and the knight on c2 for black, and your move is knight takes a1, you said, right? Okay, so now I'll play knight c6 check from my bishop on c5. Sorry? King g8. Let's say, well, knight takes rook on d8. And in that position, how's the material? In the back, yeah?
I think black's up in exchange.
Black's up in exchange. We could also be a little more clear and just say black's up in exchange for a pawn, because we did lose that c pawn. But yes, being up in exchange for the pawn there, probably good enough. That's the type of position that I think you should be ending your calculation on, when you can safely just say, okay, he's not checkmating me, there's no more threats. While in this case, maybe it wouldn't matter. Maybe you get to that position and you hadn't thought any further, and okay, it just works out for you. But I can say that some calculations that you calculate, it's beautiful, the whole thing, and then you get to a position and you hadn't calculated any further, but maybe your opponent has, and that's the way you miss things, or that's the way something might not work out for you. So knight d2, knight takes c6 forced. It's important to play knight d2 so there's no f4, knight f3, bishop g2. Okay, so this is the nice way to force the win of all that material. Knight takes check, bishop takes, again, knight takes rook, knight c6. Personally, I would always say, instead of playing king g8, to play king e8. Not that it's very relevant to the tactic, but we should go towards the center if it's safe. Yeah, in the back?
Instead of king f8, could you play king h8 earlier?
Right here, in this position?
Yeah.
You could play king here. Yeah. Probably the reason that it feels natural for me to play king f8 is because I know that I can force the win of the rook on a1 or the knight on e7 and be winning. So here, if I played rook a2,
Take on e3.
uh-huh,
And rook d1.
and take, right? Yeah. And yeah, I think in this position, it would also be very, very good. If I had to choose, honestly, a position that I would play, I don't know which one I'd choose, because here I'm not down the pawn, but maybe this knight on d5 is kind of like strong and annoying. But you're absolutely right that you could play king h8 or king f8. So it wouldn't really matter to me in terms of the answer which one you picked, as long as you just calculated it until the end where you saw a position, okay, I'm up material there, that's winning. So yes, this is fine. This works. But the one that we were looking at right there was king f8, bishop takes c5, knight takes a1, check, take back, and in this position, just like the variation that was presented by him, we finally can say, okay, you know, there's no bishop takes a7 because rook d1, right? And we lose more material. So white has to spend time going knight c3, and black will play a6, b6, something to keep the pawn, get the knight out, next move, and it's all fine here. So both of those are winning, but king f8 or king h8, more so a bit of preference. Maybe one's more accurate than the other, but they're both winning. So as long as you reach an end position, like I said, that you know is better for you, then you can stop your calculation there. But I think one of the keys early on to this problem was actually the knight g5 move early was enough to probably help us out, because we actually saw that this move worked, except for f4. So once you see that, or once you calculate that in your head, then you start looking for ways to stop f4. Because you know if you stop f4, then the whole tactic works. So that's how you stumble on the fact that knight d2 would be the right move. So f4 doesn't exist, because there's mate here. And then the rest of the tactic is all is all good. After knight c6, we saw what happens. So yeah, this is winning for black after knight d2. And actually, you came across knight g5 pretty fast. I don't even think I finished giving my speech, and you're already hitting me with knight g5. So not quite the right move, but I think, you know, we worked together to pretty much figure out knight d2 was the correct move there. So yeah, I just prepared those 5 tactics actually. So I mean, that's technically it for now, guys. But some things when I'm solving tactics that I always like to do, and I think I've mentioned them here, but more so to reiterate, is first of all to, you know, calculate the whole variation, because anytime you calculate bits and pieces, the bits and pieces you're not calculating are going to be what we call blunders. I mean, if you're ever not calculating part of it and you just feel like it's going to work out, that's where you're going to make a mistake, of course. So you want to calculate fully. You want to do it all in your head when you're doing these puzzles. Moving the pieces is a bad habit because it's all going to be visual when you're faced with a tactic in a chess game anyway. So it should all be visual when you're practicing. Like, it wouldn't make much sense to practice under different conditions than the actual game for, you know, almost any sport. So yeah, that's it for today, guys. But thanks for coming.